Hello. Hi, Scooter Mom. Glad you're here. I hope you got enough sleep this morning. Let me make sure my phone's turned down so I don't hear any noise. So we've got the rest of the chapter. It shouldn't be very long. I don't think it's going to be a very long read today. Let's see. There we go. Everything turned on. Hope your appointment went well. All right. I'll just give it a couple minutes, see if anybody's going to jump in. Oh, this is dirty. How's your day been? Oh, there we go. I can see. Irish Smart. Hello. How are you? How's your weekend going? My mascot's laying down here. She had to be up here. I hope she just stays there and doesn't do anything weird. They were outside a lot, so I think she said, "Oh, yay, you got your ceiling fan. That's awesome. They're nice." Yeah, Texas, everybody has a ceiling fan. Everybody. Oh, really? Happy birthday. The big 50. They say the 50 is the new 30, so. Other than my aches and pains, I don't feel my age. Oh, wow. Awesome. That's a long time. Yeah, but 30 years ago, they made stuff to last. Now, our heater broke a few days ago. It's only 2 years old. So Tom was trying to fix it. Hated turning 40, loved turning 50. You know why? Because after you're 50, you can get away with more. Trust me, you can. Yeah. We've got space heaters, so we're good. And it's not that cold here yet. So he tried to fix it. Now he can't. Now I just have to make the phone call to get somebody out here to fix it. So it worked fine last winter, and then we turned it on this winter and nothing. So we don't know what's wrong. So we're fine. My outlook on life has changed quite a lot in the past 10 years, thinking I'm finally gaining some wisdom. Yeah, I wish I knew then what I know now. Tom had a poll that pops up on when you're on shorts on YouTube, and it gave you 3 choices. If you could go back 10 years, if you could have perfect memory, and I can't remember the third one. And I was like, well, 10 years ago isn't far enough for me to fix anything. So I was like, perfect memory. But he was like, well, if you could remember everything, go back 10 years, I'd at least tell myself to invest more in Bitcoin. I'm like, well, yeah, there's that. Now, if I could go back 30 or 40 years, that'd be worth it. All right. We're about 4 minutes in. I'm going to go ahead and start. So we were in, let's see, I'll give it another minute. I always tell people I'll give it 5 minutes. Anybody that's doing a replay can always fast forward at least 5 minutes. So I'll keep it at the 5-minute mark. Yeah. So I don't want to start too soon and tell people that. It's just the 3 of us right now, it looks like. There might be somebody else. Yeah, because 3 doesn't include me. Duh. All right. But yeah. If I could go back 20, that'd probably be a good point. I always think it's good to go back to about the time you graduate high school and tell yourself something new. All right, now we're at 5 minutes. Okay, so all right, let me put the reading glasses on. This week I am making another appointment. I missed my last one to get new glasses because it's getting hard to see. So we just read, what were we? The contra survival engram, the pro survival engram, and now we're in the sympathy engram. And is that it for the kinds? Nope. So we got the sympathy. Then we're going to read about the painful emotion engram. So there are some advantages to imperfect memory. One could enjoy watching. I know reruns of one's favorite shows. I used to never watch movies twice because I had such a good memory. I remembered too much. Now I can watch a movie and watch it again like a couple days later with the hubby and not remember how it ended. So yeah, that's definitely true. Painful emotion. Is that it? Yep, that's it. Just 2 more engrams. All right. Sympathy and let me get a drink of water first. All right. We are getting so close to being done with this thing. Sympathy engram. The first example is an illness suffered by a patient when he was a small boy. At 2 years and a half, he was taken ill with pneumonia. He had a considerable background of attempted. Hi, Diana. So we know what he's always saying is the problem. So he had a considerable background of attempted unalivement and the usual engram cargo received from aberrated parents. He was extremely worried about the quarrels and upsets of his own home. Numbers of his engrams had been keyed in, and amongst them was his pneumonia. His grandmother came and took him to her home because whenever he was ill, his mother would go away and leave him. The incident was extremely occluded and was only reached after several late life painful emotion engrams had been discharged and after almost 100 prenatal physical pain engrams had been released. So he's saying that this kid had almost 100 prenatal engrams or traumas. So he had almost 100 traumas before he was born. Verbal, physical, whichever. I'm just like, you would have to be in a horribly abusive home to even that to be even close. It's just some of this stuff, if he hadn't gone so far, like I said, it might have actually been a whole different animal. All right. So 100. The grandmother, when he was crying in delirium, mistook his activity as demonstrating that he was conscious, which he was not, and she sought to reason with him. She said, "Those people don't really mean to be so bad to you, honey. I know they have good hearts, really. You just do what they say and believe what they tell you, and you'll be all right. Now promise you'll do that, won't you, honey?" The child, in the last steps of reaction, responded and promised her he would believe them and do what they said. "I love you very much," the grandmother continued, "and I will take care of you. Now, don't worry, honey. Forget it now. Just get a little rest." The phrases contained in this engram, because they were on a trance level and because they could be held in place by his fever and pain, produced a very profound effect on the child. He had to believe whatever was said, that this means literal belief, and cost him, for one thing, much of his sense of humor. Because he wanted to be all right, he had to believe that what his parents said. The things they had said prenatally contained every kind of bad datum possible about who was the boss and how much fun All this then was made into true data, which, because his sympathy engram and so on, he had to believe. No more horrible curse could ever be laid on anyone than those in sympathy engrams, which say, believe what is said, believe what is read, believe people. Because that engram means literally that the poor old analyzer will now never be able to evaluate its own data unless, by utter rebellion, the individual negates against the whole world, which can occasionally be done. Let this individual, however, as this one did, marry a woman who has characteristics similar to his grandmother's, a pseudo grandmother, and he becomes prey to the pain and illness chronic which he experienced in his grandmother's sympathy engrams, necessary to get and keep her sympathy, and B, all his prenatals, since the pseudo grandmother throws him into his own valence. This makes him quarrel, which makes his wife fight back, and suddenly this woman is not pseudo grandmother but pseudo mother. Exit sanity. Trans level. I think he said meant trance, like, or I don't even remember what it was, but I think it was trance. Yeah, trance. Yeah. So, because he was actually in a trance state and not conscious, that she was able to put things in his mind. My pseudo grandmother left my pseudo grandfather very traumatic. I'm sure it was. Probably got a couple engrams out of that. Hi, how you doing, Adam? In therapy, when we encounter this sympathy engram at last, it is discovered to have been buried in two ways. A, it was aligned with purpose, and B, it had a forgetter mechanism on it. I love some of these names of things he makes up. The forgetter mechanism. Okay. In B, we have a device which is common in engrams. Whenever we try to run an engram, which has somatics enough even to make the pre-clear roll around on the couch, but which contains no word content, we suspect a forgetter mechanism. There are evidently people in this world who think that the panacea for all mental discomfort is to forget. Put it out of my mind. If I remembered it, I would go mad. Junior, you never remember a thing I tell you. Nobody can remember anything. Can't remember. And just plain, I don't know, as well as the master of the family of phrases, forget it. All bar information from the brain or analyzer. A whole case, freshly opened, may keep answering everything with one of these deniers. There are many other kinds of deniers, if you recall. Oh, hey Brian, how are you? Yeah, we're still talking about engrams, and they're always caused while you're in the womb. Pretty much is what he's talking about, or early childhood, or unconsciousness. So he really does kind of repeat himself quite a bit too, but I get the point and why. Okay. Oh, I saw Macbeth down there. Let's see where he's going now. Repeater technique will eventually begin to release the phrase from various engrams and begin to show up incidents. To have a grandmother who says forget it continually every time a child gets hurt is to be cursed beyond Macbeth. A forgetter used by an ally all by itself and with practically no pain or emotion present will submerge data which in recall would not be aberrative, but which, so buried by a forgetter, makes things said just before it aberrative and literal. That was an interesting sentence. Makes things said just before it aberrative and literal. Okay. Okay. Hence, this engram remained utterly out of sight until the case was almost finished, and as soon as it was contacted, the already de-intensified reactive bank collapsed, and the patient was cleared. The second example of the sympathy engram concerns a childhood experience of a patient who, at the beginning of therapy, was a remarkably confused individual. Here is an example of sympathy engram, which is not uncommon. It will not be primary in any ally computation, but because it is often repeated in the same case, becomes aberrative. This incident occurred when the child had been badly hurt in an accident. He had received a fractured skull and concussion and was for many days in a coma. He had never learned that such an incident happened to him, although examination afterwards disclosed evidence of the fracture and disclosed also that while he had known there was a ridge in his skull, he had never wondered about it for an instant. His father and mother were at the time on the verge of divorce, and in the presence of the only partly conscious child, quarreled several times in these few days, evidently upset by his accident and recriminative as to whose fault it was. The first part of the series of engrams within this one large engram are unimportant as an example, save that they brought about a condition where the mother put herself forward as a defender of the child who was not under attack by the father. The mother's conversations aberratively indicated that the father was attacking the child, and the words in the engram rather than the action are important as aberrative factors. Finally, the father left the house and home. The mother sat down by the boy's trundle bed and weeping told him she would keep him from dying, that she would work and slave and wear her fingers to the bone to keep him alive, and I am the only reason you are alive. I have defended you against the beast and monster. If it were not for me, you would have died long ago, and I am going to care for you and protect you. So don't pay any attention to anything people tell you. I am a good mother. I have always been a good mother. Don't listen to them. Please, baby, stay here and get well, please. Hi, Joshua. So it also amazes me. Now, I get the kids in a coma and you talk to people like that, but it always amazes me about these prenatal engrams, about how much these parents talk about what's in their mind out loud. I mean, I don't think everybody talks to themselves every once in a while, but this much, I just think it's a lot. Because that's another, added factor of stretching things. You know what I'm saying? It's like all these aberrations are because they heard somebody say something while they were in the womb. And I'm like, well, how often does people actually say these things out loud? Okay. This remarkable piece of nonsense came, of course, straight out of her reactive mind. She did not feel guilty about the way she was taking care of the baby, though she had done her cyclic worst for this child since conception. There is no such thing as guilt nor a guilt complex that is not straight out of an engram that says, I am guilty, or some such similar phrase. Is he trying to say you only feel guilty from an engram? I don't understand what he's trying to say there. Here is ambivalence at work. By ambivalent is meant power on two sides. It had better be called multivalence, for it is demonstrable that people. Oh, I said that word wrong. Let me go back. For it is demonstrable. I think that's how you say it. Demonstrable that people have many valences 20 or 30 not being unusual for a normal. Now remember, valences are personalities. So he's saying people have 20 or 30 personalities from these engrams. Hey, Miss Sunrise. Okay. Thanks for stopping. Hope you're having a good weekend. Let me get a drink of water there. I'm just like, man, according to him, okay. See, when you're dealing with psychology and patients, they don't think everybody in the world is insane, or everybody in the world has trauma, or everybody in the world needs therapy. But the way he talks, we do. That's where it kind of gets beyond believable that everything wrong with somebody is from trauma. So everybody had something bad happen to them when they were young. That doesn't happen with everyone. Happens to a lot of people. Does, but not everyone. All right. This mother, with her wild pleas and her mawkish sentimentality, shifted around in balances like a whirling dervish. She was capable of being viciously cruel, torturing her child with, as the Navy calls them, capricious and unusual punishments. Yet one of these balances, which unfortunately for the patient only turned on when he was ill, was one of the savage protection for the child and assurances to him that she loved him and would never leave him to starve, etc. She formed in this child, because of her own reactive pattern and her inabilities, close to 1,000 engrams before he was 10. This particular specimen given was fairly standard. The aberrative aspect of the engram was a conviction that if one's mother were not around, and if one were not on good terms with her, one would starve, die, or suffer generally. Also, it meant, because of the time it was given, having a bad headache if one wanted to live. The whole series of these engrams made a highly complex pattern of psychosomatic ills, including sinusitis, a chronic rash, allergies, and numerous other actual physical ills, despite the fact that the patient had always tried to be as forthright in his physical being as possible and was not in any way a hypochondriac. In therapy, the entire chain of fights in this area, much of the prenatal area, and most late life painful emotion engrams were relieved before the sympathy engram displayed itself. As a note on the subject of sympathy engrams, these are in no wise exclusively found in childhood. They exist prenatally and postnatally, and sometimes late in life. Any person who defend the child against further unalive attempts become part of the sympathy engram chains, and of course, they are allies whose loss is something to be dreaded. Late sympathy engrams have been discovered at 50 years of age. One discovered at 30 consisted of a nymphomaniac nurse who, during the period when the patient was still under, I'm not going to go there. Yeah, not going there. The sympathy engram only has to sound like a sympathy engram to become one. There is no evaluation of actual intent by the reactive mind. Okay, so now we're going to go into the painful emotion engram, which he said all illnesses, if I remember right, come from a painful emotion or physical pain. 3 of these are given to illustrate a type of each. They can happen at any period, including prenatally, but are most easily tapped in more recent life when they will lead back to early incidents of physical pain. Sympathy engrams, and the like. The first example is a case of loss by death of an ally. A girl at the age of 18 was given a painful emotion engram by being told by her parents that her aunt was dead. The aunt was a prime ally. The patient, treated at the age of 31, recalled the death of her aunt but attributed her sorrow to other things, such as overstimulation of what she called her own death instinct, which was in reality engrammic chattered by mother about wanting to die and get it all over with. Actually, the aunt had been a large factor in dissuading the mother from getting rid of the child and had made the mother promise that she would not. The aunt had also tended the child postnatally through illnesses and was, in fact, the only refuge for the girl when a termagant mother and a religiously bigoted father would converge on her, for neither had wanted her, and there had been a number of efforts to terminate the pregnancy pattern. Or preterm, sorry. Her father communicated the information to the girl with a sonorous voice and appropriately long face. I want you to be very respectful at the funeral, Agatha. What funeral? Your aunt just passed to the great beyond. Yes, death must come to us all, and we must all be prepared some day to meet the fate which waits for us at the end of the road. For it is a long path, life and God and flaming hell wait at its other end, and someday we all must die. Be sure you are very respectful at the funeral. She had begun to pale at the word funeral. She was to all purposes unconscious when she heard the first mention of death, and she remained unconscious if moving about for 2 whole days. So kind of in a unconsciousness, like we would call it something like a zombie state because you're upset. The case had been very slow until the engram was discovered and run. An enormous discharge of grief took place, which had never before manifested itself. It was reduced to boredom in 8 recountings, at which the first moment of the aunt's intervention in the unalive attempt was automatically contacted and released. Therefore, the case made progress in the prenatal area, prohibition against getting rid of it having been removed, and according to theory, free units being available, the charge had come off the prenatal area. There were 5 other allies in this case. The girl, with the parents who had been so wicked to her, having attached herself to anyone who would show her interest in refuge. As lower physical pain came into view, more allies showed up and more painful emotion engrams were discharged, permitting new physically painful engrams to display themselves. Oh, yeah, it does. And if you've been here any of the times, there are some of these, you'll hear me hesitate sometimes because I'm thinking I'm hitting a period and I realize it's a comma. And literally a whole paragraph will have nothing but commas in it. And so punctuation, this man did not understand. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, I know. I don't know if you were here that day, but I've talked about this before. Just for shits and giggles, I took a paragraph and I read it into Chat DPT and I said, could you make this simpler? And a paragraph turned into a sentence and explained it just fine. He just adds so much more than is necessary. Like he just couldn't stop himself from writing everything. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I did that once. And I'm like, literally, I feel like this book could have been at least a third less if he'd have just not had to change all the names of everything and make it his own stuff that he made up or the way he explains things. He thinks everybody reading this book is 5. So that's how he writes it for a 5-year-old. All right. The next example is an engram from a patient who had all his life been reared and cared for by moneyed parents. He had a very severe prenatal area, which yet would not lift to view. It was discovered at length that his nurses had been his only source of love and affection, and that his mother, being a woman who liked to unsettle the household as often as possible, would discharge a nurse every time she found the child had grown fond of her, even though the mother herself made it plain that she considered this child nasty. Now that would cause trauma. It really would. That makes sense. Yep, that does make sense. Yeah. If he condensed it, it would have been a pamphlet instead of a book. Probably would have. But yeah, that he does write like that. Like he has to put as many words in this book as possible. All right. The engram, the boy sees his nurse coming out of the house with her suitcase in her hand. He stops playing in the yard and runs to her to scare her. She is quite angry from the scene she has just had. An Irish girl, hold on, and yet she smooths her face and kneels down beside him. I am leaving, buddy. I can't stay here anymore. No, I can't be your nurse now. But there, you'll have another one. Don't cry. It's not good for little boys to cry. Goodbye, buddy. I love you. And she goes off out of sight. Yeah, definitely. Honestly, this whole book is a trigger warning. I honestly, if I went back and restarted, I would have put trigger warning at the beginning of each. But I'm new at this, so I didn't think about it. He was stunned from the first instant she said she was leaving. The prohibition against crying was from an ally. Whatever an ally says must be good and must be believed because allies are survival and one must survive. Allies, therefore, must be believed. He had not cried except on rare occasions of enormous sorrow in all the years thereafter. 8 of these departures were touched without result, but with this one they all loosened and discharged one after the other. Any departure of or from an ally contains an emotional charge, which, if it will not display itself, is elsewhere suppressed. So, yeah, like I've said before, touching on what we were just saying, you know, because trauma is real, trauma does happen to children, and he is following along what regular therapy would be. I mean, some of the stuff that he says to do about it makes sense and how some traumas occur. It's just that he just changed the whole science of it to his own thing. And that's where it kind of gets into the weeds. Because, like I've said before, if he would have kept it at a certain level and kept this Dianetics and actually wanted people to get help, they probably would have. But, that wasn't his goal. The third example of the painful emotion engram is the third type, loss of an ally by reversal. A wife loved her husband very dearly. They had gotten along well together until his parents came into the vicinity and began to malign his wife. He was furious with them for it and quarreled with them. His wife was a pseudo ally, and unfortunately, that ally had told the child to believe his parents. This is fairly chronic with allies. If they would give the child correct data when he is emotionally disturbed or ill, there would be less trouble. Or a remark such as, well, you'll grow up someday and be able to care for yourself, is much better than a hat full of Emersonian platitudes. This brought about a tragic reversal. The reactive mind, restimulated at the sight of his wife, the husband was emotionally disturbed, very restimulated already by his parents, threw in the data that one must believe one's parents. This made his wife no good, as per their aberrative chatter. He went into his father's Valence to escape this imponderable situation, and that Valence beat women. He struck his wife repeatedly, dramatizing one of his father's engrams. I hate you, you are no good, I should have listened to them sooner, you're no good. The wife was in therapy. This charge suppressed itself, not out of shame for her husband's actions, but for the mechanical reason that the early area had to be relieved before this one would discharge. Smart file clerk. Her case had slowed down to a point where the board looked entirely clear, although somatics, which she attributed to natural causes, and aberrations, which she said were reasonable reactions, still manifested themselves. Suddenly, this incident appeared when repeater technique was used on the auditor's random guess. I hate you, for it was known that she said this now and then to her husband. 3 recountings discharged this painful emotion despite its violence. It made her weep until she almost choked. Immediately, 12 prenatals, all fights between mother and father, an ally of which her husband was the pseudo ally, wherein the mother beat loss of dogs, dolls, money, position, even the threat of a loss, anything may bring about a painful emotion engram, so long as it is loss. It may be lost by death, lost by departure, lost by reversal, anything connected with the life of the patient and associated by him with his own survival seems to be capable of locking up life units when lost. A condition of such painful emotion is that it has early physical painful engrams upon which to append. The physical I'm sorry. The physically painful engram is still the villain, but it has an accomplice in the painful emotion engram. That's the end. That was shorter than I thought. Jeez. But yeah, I know because, it's made me think about my traumas too a bit because even though his science of it was fairly made up, the basis of the therapy and the basis of getting to trauma and releasing it does make some sense. I don't agree that all illness and all physical pain is caused by a trauma from the womb or early. I don't believe that, but as far as the basics of it, he did study some psychology somewhere. I mean, he understands therapy. I do remember when I did a short biography of him, he spent 2 years either at or working at, I couldn't define, um a hospital, a mental hospital. And I'm still wondering if he was a patient or he was working there. I think he got a lot from there. Um, of course, other places. He uses a lot of Freud, obviously. I don't know if he just took Freud's ideas and used them, or if he himself had major issues with his parents or his mother. Because, like I said, he acts like every woman who's pregnant is having an affair or she tried to unalive her pregnancy, because that's where this all starts. And I'm like, that's a bit of a reach, or not a reach. That's not what I want to say. It just seems a bit much that he thinks that just is happened. That's everybody's problems. And I just don't think that could be true. Even back then, you know. So, or they talked about unaliving, or it's always something to do with that. So I think it's Cricket is doing an ancestry of L. Ron Hubbard, and gonna look for if there's any issues with the parents. Also, if some of this might come from being an Army wife myself, um, and his dad being in the Navy, he was left alone a lot with his mother, especially Navy, because when my son was in the Navy, when you're gone for 6 months. When you're home, you're home. In the Army, even when he's home, he's gone for 2 or 3 weeks for training here and there on the base right here. So, but we had, 21 years in the Army, I was alone for over 10. So my kids only had me for over 10. So, and things went, oh, sorry about that, differently, when it was just me and I didn't have anybody else to rely on. I did it all myself. sometimes it was a bit stressful and I was under stress. I probably was a little bit more out of sorts than I should have been. So I can see where he might have problems with his mother because of that, because dad wasn't always there. And I do see that in the military. I do see that. Especially I babysat for a mom who's had 3 or 4 boys. I only babysat for her for the summer while she was taking college classes. And she was a bit of, I don't know what she was like at home, but to me, I went to church with her. She was very quiet, reserved. I don't think she was the disciplinarian in the house. And those kids got really out of hand. Really out of hand. They tried me, didn't work. One of them had some issues and he tried, but um, I got on him really quickly and he didn't, uh, he stopped trying to throw tantrums and give me a hard time after that. But I could always tell when kids' parents would show up. We had to make a rule that while they were in the house, I was still in charge, because they would immediately change as soon as the parent walked in the door and try to um, pit us against each other or try to get attention. So I'm like, look, until you go outside, I will deal with it, and then you guys can go. And the kids knew that and they stopped doing that stuff. So I can understand being a Navy brat. Probably he does have that issues with his mom. But I don't understand why he goes back to this prenatal stuff, the fighting in the womb, the unaliving pregnancy all the time. I don't understand where he got that from or why. That's something I would love. I'm hoping when we read this book, A Piece of Blue Sky, after this, it's that kind of a overall book about LRH and Scientology by John Atack. I'm hoping maybe he'll know something about this. LRH had severe mommy issues. Yeah. So I'm hoping in there that we might find something out, because I'd be very interested. But then again, sometimes there's no reason for things. Somebody's just nuts. Sometimes you can't figure it out. Well, this was short, but it's okay. Let's see. Next week, let's see what's next. Let's see how much we have left. There's so much crap in the back of this book. We still got quite a bit. Paperbacks hold so many words. Oh, that's going to be interesting. So towards the back, it says Dianetics, past and future, and I just saw Judiciary Dianetics. What? This brief summary of Judiciary Dianetics is included in this present work as an aid to the auditor. Judiciary Dianetics covers the field of adjudication within the society and amongst the societies of man. That sounds kind of interesting. I wonder where he's going to go with that. We still got this much. About a quarter. Almost a third. Man, I thought I was getting close. So the next chapter is Mechanisms and Aspects of Therapy, Part 1. So I'm really surprised that he uses the word therapy, because he's so against psychiatry. All right, you guys. Hopefully I'll be back out protesting this week. Tom had surgery last week. He's doing good on his own now, and he's able to get around just fine. So I'll be able to come back out this week. So hopefully I'll see you guys this week. And if not, y'all have a good week, and we'll see you later.